Hello, welcome back. So, I love things that make sense and I love facts. That's why I talk about history. You can usually find a reliable source or sources and it generally makes sense. I also love things that don't make sense though. Today's topic is one of those things. Today we look at something that has been baffling people throughout the ages. We're going to look at Stonehenge. What is it? Who built it? And what is it for? Stonehenge is located on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England. Archaeologists believe it was constructed in stages, with the first stage of construction being as early as 5,000 or more years ago. While the site had been used previously, the first part of the monument as we know it today came about in about 3100 BCE. This included a circular bank and a ditch that were 360 feet in diameter, with entrances at both the north and the south. Within these enclosures are 56 pits known as Aubrey holes after the man who discovered them, John Aubrey. The Aubrey holes are considered phase 1 as they came sometime after the bank and ditch were dug out. Several centuries later, in around 2600 BCE, the next phase is thought to have been the placement of the 80 bluestones in a circular or horseshoe formation. What's interesting to note is that these bluestones actually weren't native to the area. They actually came from the Preseli Mountains in southwest Wales. That is 140 to 150 miles away. Also during this phase, the north entrance was widened, and this resulted in it precisely matching the direction of the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset. Another interesting feature thought to have been added during this time are the 2-mile-long parallel ditches leading from Stonehenge to the River Avon, which go by the name of Stonehenge Avenue. The next phase is thought to have taken place between 2600 and 2400 BCE. This is where the 30 iconic sarsen stones were added. They came from a quarry 25 miles away and weighed about 25 tons each. The stones were latched together using joints carved into the rock to hold them securely. Within the circle of sarsen stones were 5 trilithons of sarsen stone arranged in a horseshoe shape. These two were latched together with joints. Between 2400 and 2280 BCE, it is thought that the bluestones were re-erected, trimmed, and placed inside the sarsen circle. The bluestones were again arranged in the next phase between 2280 and 1930 BCE. They were moved into an oval formation within the sarsen circle. The work done in this phase wouldn't really stick as the stones would fall over with time. Not much drastically changed after this point. As you may have guessed, much like with the Great Pyramid of Giza, we can only guess at how such a great feat was accomplished. They had no modern tools or equipment to shape, measure, or move these huge 2 to 25 ton stones 50 to 170 miles away. One of the theories is that Stonehenge was the work of Merlin the Wizard. Yes, that Merlin, of King Arthur's court. The story is that it was built in memorial of the hundreds of British nobles that were slain on Salisbury Plain. An army was sent to Ireland to retrieve a stone circle called Dance of the Giants, erected by ancient Irish giants, created of magical bluestones. The Irish were defeated, but they couldn't retrieve the stones, so Merlin used his magic to transport them and arrange them where they stand. As wildly inaccurate and mythical as this sounds to us, many from the time and onward into the medieval era actually believed it. We now know that Stonehenge actually predates King Arthur and Merlin by thousands of years, so much for that. Much of the true investigative work on Stonehenge and its origins started in 1620 when Inigo Jones was selected by King James I to study the structure. He downright refused the story of Merlin, calling it a fable, and offered the explanation that it was the work of the Romans. He surmised it was previously a temple to the Roman sky god Coelus. After reading the book Inigo's son, John Webb, had published regarding their work, another scholar, Walter Charlatan, wasn't having it. He claimed Stonehenge was replicating the work of megalithic structures in Denmark and that Inigo had followed a scandalous and disingenuous course of imagination to come to his conclusions. Another theory as to how it was built, or by whom, is that it was done by the Druids. This claim was made by John Aubrey, for whom the Aubrey holes are named after. Stonehenge also predates the Celts living in the area by 1,000 years, however, so this is also unlikely. Inigo Jones actually specifically had a lot to say about just how unlikely it was that the Druids could have created such a masterpiece. Historians these days are attributing the construction to multiple groups of people versus it being the group of one singular people. The artifacts at the site have led them to this hypothesis, and it's one that makes the most sense considering the building of the monument was done in several stages over a very long period of time. With so many people working on it over centuries of time, there must be some definitive and important purpose the site holds, right? Maybe. But if there is, we certainly don't know what that purpose is. The best we can do is guess at possible purposes. One thing that can generally be agreed upon regarding the site is that it was at some point, if not at several points, used as a burial ground. Remains of cremated and non-cremated human remains have been found at the site, particularly around the bluestones. Something else interesting about the site that has garnered a lot of interest is the way it corresponds to astrological events. Architect John Wood noted in the 18th century that the stones were arranged in a way that corresponded to lunar cycles and that it must be a temple to the moon goddess Diana. To mix both astronomy and the belief that it was built by Druids, Sir J. Lockyer published a book in 1906 that actually asserted Stonehenge was created by astronomer priests in the 2nd and 3rd millennium BCE, and that they did in fact plan Stonehenge to be used as an astronomical calendar. Furthermore, the astronomer Gerald Hawkins also suggested in the 1960s that because of the way that everything lines up, Stonehenge could have been used as an astrological calendar. It lines up to phases of the moon, solstices, equinoxes, and eclipses. By using a computer analysis, Hawkins was able to deduce that the odds of everything lining up as accurately as it does by chance would be greater than 1,000,000 to 1. While there has been some speculation over whether the builders thousands of years ago could have possibly known all of this, I personally believe that there's no way it could have been just a coincidence. How could these stones, pits, and entrances just so happen to line up perfectly with multiple astrological events unless it was intended to be that way? With odds of over 1,000,000 to 1, I'd say they couldn't. In 1975, Alexander Thom then took the idea of the purpose being astronomy to a new level. He had been studying other megaliths and found a standard unit of measure among them called a megalithic yard. This fact, along with the idea of the ancient builders using regularly proportioned shapes and having an understanding of geometry and astronomy, were all used as evidence when he was published in the Journal for the History of Astronomy. It is also believed that Stonehenge was a place of healing, as bluestones are thought to have curative powers, and many of the bones found at the site had shown signs of illness or injury. Part of me tries to write that off to being that there was no medicine or any way to properly treat injury at the time, so it was likely that most people at one point suffered an injury that didn't heal or were more likely to die from an illness in general, so perhaps most bones from the time would show similar signs. It could be that they were, however, in higher concentrations at the site, and that's what led to this conclusion. I can't say I wouldn't be surprised if it was used as a place of healing, though, because many different belief systems put a lot of power in the earth and what comes from it. If things weren't interesting enough about the site already, Alfred Watkins came to the site in the 1920s to make some further observations. This is when he made the assertion that Stonehenge fell upon ley lines. Ley lines are said to be ancient, long-forgotten grids that were used long ago. Different things have been found and are found on the ley lines throughout history, like megaliths, burial mounds, pagan worship sites, and even churches. Some even believe that leys carry a mystical earth energy that the ancient builders were somehow privy to. Interestingly, a number of weird things are said to happen on or around the ley lines, like an increased number of UFO sightings or even seen images of the past. The final theory, tying into the UFO sightings, is that Stonehenge, like other things we have no perfect answer for, was that it was created by aliens for one purpose or another. Today, Stonehenge can be visited and you can tell for yourself whether you feel any mystical powers. Stonehenge has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1986 and receives approximately 1 million visitors per year. Of the original 80 bluestones in the ring-like formation that became the inner ring, 43 remain standing all these years later. One thing I found interesting is that there is always a huge midsummer celebration here, barring things like COVID. Even though it has widely been disproven that the Druids did not in fact create the megalith, they are always in attendance at the gathering each year. There has also been a rise in Druid practice. Also regarding the Midsummer Festival, carbon dating at the site actually estimates that sometime between 2600 and 2400 BCE, as many as 4,000 people gathered at the site to celebrate both midsummer and midwinter. This makes sense seeing as the stones are lined up to match midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset. I think what would be truly hilarious is that if the actual story is that one day some guys were really bored, because there was nothing to do back then anyway, and they were like, I know, let's waste a few weeks stacking all these random stones in a random pattern that looks cool. They finished, they were like, yeah, this is cool, and then they forgot about it. Here we are, however long later, trying to figure out the mystical, magical meaning of something some dumb boys did one day when they were bored. While that would be really funny, I do believe there's more to it though, at least I hope there is, and it would make more sense that there would be. The alignment on the ley lines, as well as with the astrological events, couldn't possibly be a random coincidence. The odds of more than 1,000,000 to 1 are just too slim. Just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it wasn't possible. Much like with the Great Pyramid, the process by which they understood astronomy and geometry could have been so commonplace at the time that it wasn't even worth documenting. I'm not saying that's what happened, I'm saying it's possible. This is just one of those things I feel we'll never have a satisfactory, set in stone, get it, answer to, and we'll have to use our best judgment to simply deduce all that we can. All I can say is, I do want to go here and maybe feel whatever mysticism there could possibly be. Even just to be in the presence of objects that have been standing, studied, and visited for so long by so many people would be an inspiration or a feeling of magic all in itself. If there was no mystical property originally intended, I have no doubt that it's gained it by so many people believing that there's more to it than it being just a stone circle of rocks. All of it just makes you wonder, what did they know that we don't? Well, that's all for today's video. I wish there was more rock solid, get it, information to provide, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. I'll catch you next time.